Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair watching the stars drift by. The UHS Defiant was 3 weeks into a routine patrol when the emergency signal came through. The ship's communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Stone, looked up from her console with worry in her eyes. "Captain, we're getting a distress call from the Zephyrian homeworld. It's marked as urgent." Morrison nodded. "Put it through." The main screen flickered and showed Ambassador Kira Voss, one of the tall, blue-skinned Zephyrians who served as humanity's main contact with the galactic community. Her usually calm face was filled with fear. "Captain Morrison, thank the stars we reached you. Something terrible is happening. The Void Stalkers have returned." Dr. Lisa Park, the ship's science officer, leaned forward. "The what?" Voss closed her large purple eyes. "Ancient predators from beyond the galaxy. They feed on consciousness itself. When they attack, they don't just kill you. They eat your mind, your thoughts, your very soul. The victim becomes an empty shell while the stalkers absorb everything that made them who they were." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. "How long since they appeared?" 6 months ago. They started at the outer rim and have been moving inward ever since. Every world they touch falls silent. Every fleet we send against them simply stops fighting as their crews are consumed from light years away. Commander Ryan Hayes, the tactical officer, studied the star charts. "What about the Galactic Federation? 12 species with thousands of ships?" "In full retreat," Voss said sadly. "The Krathan warriors tried to fight them head-on. Their entire battle fleet was turned into mindless husks in minutes. The Nexari used their most advanced weapons. Nothing worked. The stalkers seem to grow stronger with each mind they consume." Morrison stood up. "We'll come to assist immediately." Voss shook her head. "Captain, you don't understand. These creatures have terrorized the galaxy for millions of years. They disappear for centuries, then return to feed. No weapon can stop them. No strategy works. They read our thoughts before we can act on them." "Then why call us?" Dr. Park asked. "Because you're different," Voss replied. "Your species was kept on the edge of galactic society because the Council believed humans were too chaotic, too unpredictable. But now, that chaos might be our only hope." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Morrison looked around at his crew. They were all thinking the same thing. Humanity had been trying to prove themselves worthy of joining the galactic community for 50 years. Now they might be the only hope left. "Set course for the Zephyrian. Homeworld maximum speed," Morrison ordered. "And send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we might need every ship they can spare." 3 days later, the Defiant approached the Zephyrian system. What they saw made the crew gasp in horror. The beautiful floating cities that once orbited the planet now drifted dark and silent. No lights, no movement, no signs of life. "Scanning the surface," Dr. Park reported, her voice shaking. "I'm detecting millions of life signs, but their brain activity is almost zero. They're alive but not really living." Morrison watched the dead cities float past. Each one had housed millions of beings. Now they were all empty shells. Ambassador Voss met them at the temporary command center on one of the planet's moons. She looked older, more tired than before. "It happened 2 days ago," she explained as they walked through corridors filled with refugees from other worlds. "The stalkers didn't even land. They just appeared in orbit and began their feeding. Within hours, every Zephyrian on the planet was consumed. Their bodies live on, but their minds are gone forever." Dr. Park was studying readings from her scanner. "These void stalkers, what do they look like?" "Crystalline beings like living glass. They exist partially in our dimension and partially in what they call the thought realm. That's how they can consume minds across vast distances. They turn consciousness into food." Commander Hayes was looking at tactical displays. "You said every military response has failed. What exactly happens when you fight them?" "The moment our ships approach, the crews start collapsing. Their minds are drained away before they can even fire a shot. The more organized and logical the attack, the faster they fall. It's as if the stalkers can predict and counter any rational strategy." Morrison was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Finally, he looked up. What if the strategy isn't rational? Voss stared at him. What do you mean? Every species in the Federation is highly advanced, right? They think logically, plan carefully, act rationally. But humans are different. We do crazy things. We make decisions based on feelings instead of facts. We believe things that don't make sense. What if that's exactly what we need? Dr. Park was nodding slowly. The captain might be right. If these creatures feed on ordered thought, maybe chaotic human thinking would be harder to digest. Commander Hayes grinned. You're talking about fighting crazy with crazy. Exactly, Morrison said. Has anyone ever tried attacking them with completely unpredictable tactics? Voss looked confused. How can tactics be unpredictable? Military strategy requires logic and planning. Not human strategy. Hayes laughed. We've won battles by doing things that made no sense. Sometimes the best plan is to have no plan at all. Just then, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. A technician called out, "Multiple contacts approaching the system. It's a stalker fleet." Morrison looked at the tactical display. Dozens of crystalline ships were emerging from hyperspace, their surfaces pulsing with an evil light. As they watched, the few remaining Zephyrian defense ships moved to intercept. Call them back, Morrison ordered. What? Voss asked. Call back your ships. Don't fight them the old way. Let us try something different. On the screen, they watched as the Zephyrian ships approached the stalkers in perfect formation, following centuries of military doctrine. Within minutes, the ships stopped moving as their crews were consumed. Morrison activated the ship's communications. All hands, this is the captain. We're about to face an enemy that feeds on logical thought. So from now on, I want everyone to think as illogically as possible. Sing songs, tell jokes, remember your childhood. Do whatever it takes to keep your minds chaotic. We're going to show these things what humanity is really made of. Dr. Park was already working on modifications to the ship's systems. If I'm right about this, we need to boost our mental defenses. I'm going to pipe random music through the ship's speakers and display nonsense patterns on all the screens. Anything to keep our thoughts scattered. Commander Hayes was planning their attack. Instead of following any known tactical doctrine, he was basing their approach on old Earth movies and video games. We'll attack from 6 different directions at once, change course every 30 seconds, and fire our weapons in completely random patterns. Ambassador Voss watched the humans prepare with growing amazement. They were about to face the galaxy's greatest threat with tactics that made no sense whatsoever. But somehow, for the first time in months, she felt hope. Dr. Lisa Park worked through the night studying the captured Void Stalker technology. The crystalline fragments they had recovered from a destroyed ship looked beautiful, but felt cold and wrong. When she touched them, her mind filled with whispers of consumed thoughts. It's like they're still feeding, she told Captain Morrison as he joined her in the lab. Even these broken pieces are trying to drain my consciousness. Morrison looked at the glowing crystals. But you're still standing. Why aren't they affecting you like they did the aliens? That's what I'm trying to figure out, Park said, pulling up her research on the main screen. Look at these brain scans. This is a Zephyrian mind. See how organized it is? Every thought follows logical pathways. Their telepathic abilities actually make their thinking even more structured. She changed the display. Now look at a human brain scan. Our thoughts jump all over the place. We can think about breakfast, worry about work, and remember a song from childhood all at the same time. Most aliens find this confusing and primitive. But the stalkers can't handle it, Morrison realized. Exactly. They're like a virus that only attacks certain types of computer systems. Human minds don't run the right operating system for them to infect. The lab door opened and Elder Thane Zor entered. The elderly Zephyrian scientist had been working with Park to understand the stalker threat. His blue skin was pale with exhaustion. I have reviewed your findings, Dr. Park. Your theory is correct but incomplete. The stalkers do not merely consume organized thought. They require it. Logical, predictable thinking is their food source. Park nodded. That explains why all the advanced species fell so quickly. The more sophisticated their minds, the easier they are to drain. Commander Hayes entered carrying a datapad. I've been studying our first encounter with the Stalkers. When we attacked their ships yesterday, something interesting happened. Every time our crew started thinking chaotically, the Stalkers pulled back. Morrison remembered the battle. The Defiant had approached the Stalker fleet with no battle plan at all. Instead, Hayes had ordered random course changes while the crew sang old songs and told jokes over the communications system. The crystalline ships had seemed confused, unable to predict what the humans would do next. We need to test this theory properly, Morrison said. But safely. Elder Zor nodded toward a containment field in the corner of the lab. We have a small Stalker fragment still active. Perhaps Captain Morrison would volunteer for a controlled exposure. Park looked worried. That's incredibly dangerous. We don't know what could happen. We need to know, Morrison said firmly. If we're going to save the galaxy, we have to understand our advantages. 20 minutes later, Morrison sat in a chair surrounded by medical equipment, while Park and Elder Zor monitored his vital signs. The active Stalker fragment glowed brighter as it was brought closer to the human captain. Beginning exposure, Park announced. Jake, I want you to think about anything except what we're doing right now. Morrison closed his eyes and let his mind wander. He thought about his daughter's laugh, wondered what his wife was making for dinner back on Earth, remembered a funny movie he had seen last week. His thoughts jumped from topic to topic with no logic or pattern. The Stalker fragment pulsed, trying to connect with his consciousness. Morrison could feel it probing his mind, looking for the organized thought patterns it needed to feed, but every time it found a logical thread, his brain would jump to something completely different. Amazing, Elder Zor whispered, watching the readings. The fragment is actually retreating. It cannot maintain contact with his chaotic thought patterns. Morrison opened his eyes and grinned. It felt like trying to grab water with your bare hands. The harder it tried to hold on to my thoughts, the more they slipped away. Park was studying the data excitedly. This changes everything. If human minds are naturally resistant to Stalker attacks, we could actually fight them directly. News of the successful test spread quickly through the refugee fleet. For the first time since the Stalkers had returned, the alien species had real hope. But hope alone would not be enough. Captain Amy Chen arrived the next day with the UHS Sentinel and a full complement of Marines. She was a small woman with fierce eyes who had earned her reputation fighting pirates in the outer systems. Earth Command sent every available ship, she told Morrison as they reviewed tactical plans. We have 12 human vessels now, plus whatever alien ships are still operational. Colonel Pete Williams, the Marine commander, was less optimistic. 12 ships against a fleet that has consumed half the galaxy? Those aren't great odds. Q. Odds don't matter if we're playing by different rules, Morrison replied. He turned to the assembled captains and alien commanders. Traditional space combat follows predictable patterns. Ships maintain formation, follow battle plans, coordinate their attacks. The Stalkers can read those intentions and counter them. Chen nodded. So we throw the rulebook out the window. Exactly. We attack from all directions with no coordination at all. Every ship does whatever its captain thinks is best in the moment. No communication, no formation flying, no predetermined strategies. Elder Zor looked confused. How can you win a battle with no strategy? Commander Hayes smiled. You'd be surprised what humans can accomplish with pure chaos. We've been doing it for thousands of years. Over the next few hours, the human captains planned the most disorganized attack in military history. Each ship would approach the Stalker fleet along a different route. Weapons would be fired at random intervals. Course changes would be based on the crew's mood rather than tactical necessity. Dr. Park made one final discovery that changed their approach entirely. While studying the Stalker fragments, she found that human creativity actually caused them pain. When she thought about fictional stories, imaginary worlds, or impossible scenarios, the crystals would dim and crack. They can't process things that don't exist, she explained to the gathered commanders. Fiction, fantasy, dreams, these concepts are toxic to them. Their minds are built to consume reality, not imagination. Morrison felt the pieces clicking together. So our crews should think about the most impossible creative things they can imagine while fighting? Exactly. Tell them to imagine they're fighting dragons or flying through a cartoon, or that they're characters in a video game. Anything that isn't real. Colonel Williams laughed. My Marines are going to love this. I can tell them to pretend they're superheroes. As the fleet prepared for battle, Morrison reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. Humanity had gone from being the galaxy's outcasts to its potential saviors, all because they had something the advanced alien species lacked: the ability to think irrationally. The Stalker fleet was approaching the inhabited worlds of the inner galaxy. Billions of lives depended on the success of their chaotic plan. As Morrison looked around at his crew, he saw determination mixed with the kind of crazy confidence that only humans possessed. All ships, prepare for the most disorganized attack. In galactic history, he announced over the fleet communications. Remember, the more senseless and impossible your actions seem, the better. We're not just fighting for the galaxy. We're fighting to prove that sometimes crazy is exactly what the universe needs. The human ships began moving toward the Stalker fleet, each following its own bizarre path through space. To any observer, it would look like complete madness, which was exactly the point. The Battle of Andorian Gates began like no space combat in galactic history. Instead of forming neat battle lines, the 12 human ships scattered in all directions like startled birds. Each captain followed their own wild instincts while their crews filled the communication channels with songs, jokes, and random thoughts. Captain Morrison watched his tactical display with satisfaction as the Defiant spun through a series of impossible maneuvers. Commander Hayes was piloting based on a dice game he had played as a child, changing course every time the random numbers in his head told him to turn. Stalker fleet is trying to form a response pattern, reported Lieutenant Stone from communications, but they keep starting and stopping. It's like they can't figure out what we're doing. That's because we don't know what we're doing either. Morrison laughed. Fire all weapons at that big crystalline ship, but aim for the pretty parts. The Defiant's energy beams lanced out toward a massive Stalker vessel. Instead of targeting weapon systems or engines like normal military doctrine demanded, they hit decorative crystal formations that served no tactical purpose. The alien ship reeled back as if in pain. Across the battlefield, Captain Chen was having even more fun. The Sentinel was dancing between 3 Stalker ships while her crew pretended they were in an old Earth movie about space pirates. Her weapons. Officer Lieutenant Danny Ross was making sound effects with his mouth every time they fired. This is the most ridiculous battle I've ever been in, Chen announced over her ship's intercom. And I love every minute of it. The Stalkers were clearly confused. Their crystalline forms pulsed with frustrated energy as they tried to predict human movements. Every time they thought they understood the pattern, the humans would do something completely different. Colonel Williams was preparing for the most unusual boarding action in military history. His Marines were gathered in the shuttle bay of the transport ship UHS Ranger, getting ready to assault a Stalker vessel directly. Listen up, Marines, Williams called out. Forget everything you learned about combat tactics. When we board that ship, I want you to think about the weirdest, most impossible things you can imagine. Pretend you're fighting monsters from a fairy tale, or that you're characters in a video game. Sergeant Joe Turner raised his hand. Sir, what if we just act completely insane? That's the idea, Turner. The more crazy you act, the better you'll fight these things. The boarding shuttle launched from the Ranger, spinning and twisting through space like a leaf in the wind. Instead of approaching the Stalker ship tactically, the pilot flew in loops and spirals while the Marines inside sang an old drinking song. When they reached the crystalline vessel, the Marines discovered that its interior was a maze of glowing walls designed to drain the minds of intruders. But Williams had prepared for this. Each Marine carried a small music player loaded with the most chaotic songs from human history. Turner, take point and sing something stupid, Williams ordered as they moved through the crystal corridors. Turner started reciting a nonsense poem he had learned in school while advancing toward the ship's core. The crystalline walls around him began to dim and crack as his chaotic thoughts overwhelmed their feeding systems. Meanwhile, Dr. Park was making discoveries aboard the Defiant that changed everything they knew about the Stalkers. As she studied the battle, she realized that human creativity was not just confusing to the creatures, it was actually toxic to them. "Captain, I'm reading massive disruption in the Stalker fleet's coordination," she reported excitedly. "Every time one of our crew members imagines something impossible, it sends shockwaves through their hive mind." Morrison had an idea. What if we all imagined the same impossible thing at once? "It might overload their entire system," Park agreed. Morrison activated the fleet communication system. "All human ships, this is Morrison. I want everyone to close their eyes and imagine that we're not fighting spaceships, but giant soap bubbles that pop when we touch them. Make it as silly and impossible as you can." Across the fleet, thousands of human crew members began imagining the Stalker ships as fragile bubbles floating through space. They pictured themselves as children running through a field, popping bubbles with their fingers. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Stalker ships began to shake and convulse as their collective consciousness was overwhelmed by the shared impossible imagery. 3 of the crystalline vessels actually shut down their main systems, drifting helplessly through space. But the battle was far from over. The largest Stalker ship, a massive crystalline cathedral, began pulsing with angry red light. It was trying to force its way into the human minds by sheer power. Captain Chen saw her opportunity. "Sentinel to all ships, watch this." She accelerated directly toward the giant ship, while her crew broadcast every silly thought they could generate. "This is insane," her tactical officer warned. "Exactly," Chen replied. "The more insane, the better." The Sentinel flew straight into the formation of 6 Stalker ships surrounding the cathedral. Instead of being destroyed, something amazing happened. The human ship's chaotic mental energy created a feedback loop that caused 2 of the Stalker vessels to shut down completely. But victory came at a terrible cost. The UHS Ranger, damaged in the initial attack, was caught by a Stalker energy beam. The entire crew fell unconscious as their minds were partially drained. Only the Marines aboard the enemy ship survived, protected by their chaotic thoughts. "Captain," Morrison felt the psychic backlash from the Ranger's crew and made a desperate decision. He opened his mind completely to the Stalker hive consciousness, trying to draw their attention away from his people. The result was immediate and overwhelming. Morrison collapsed on the bridge as his consciousness was pulled into the Stalker network. But instead of being consumed, his chaotic human thoughts began spreading through their collective mind like a virus. Dr. Park rushed to check on the captain. He's alive, but his brainwaves are completely chaotic. It's like he's dreaming while awake. Commander Hayes took command as the battle continued around them. The Stalker fleet was in disarray, their ships moving in confused circles as Morrison's unconscious dreams disrupted their coordination. "The captain's mind is still fighting them," Park reported. "Even unconscious, his thoughts are too chaotic for them to digest. He's creating dead zones in space where the Stalkers can't operate." Across the galaxy, the news of the human victory spread quickly. For the first time in centuries, someone had not only survived a Stalker attack, but actually defeated them. The alien species began to understand what made humanity so unique. Elder Zor, monitoring the battle from the command station, spoke in wonder. "Your species possesses something we have never encountered. You can be logical and illogical at the same time. You can feel fear and courage together. You can believe contradictory things and somehow make them both true." Hayes nodded, watching the surviving Stalker ships retreat toward the edge of the galaxy. "We call it being human. It drives us crazy sometimes, but apparently, it's exactly what the universe needed." As the immediate threat passed, the fleet gathered around Morrison's unconscious form. His chaotic dreams continued to broadcast across space, creating a protective barrier that the Stalkers could not cross. But Dr. Park knew this was only the beginning. The Stalkers had retreated, not been destroyed. Somewhere beyond the galactic rim lay their homeworld, the source of their ancient hunger. To end this threat forever, they would need Morrison awake and leading them into the heart of darkness itself. The question was whether they could wake him up without losing the chaotic shield his dreams provided. The fate of the galaxy might depend on keeping their captain lost in his own impossible thoughts. Hayes looked out at the stars and smiled grimly. "Well, We wanted to prove humans belonged in the galactic community. I guess we showed them what we're really capable of. The battle was won, but the war was just beginning. Dr. Lisa Park had been working for 3 weeks to wake Captain Morrison from his strange coma. His body was healthy, but his mind was trapped somewhere between consciousness and the stalker hive network. Every few hours, his chaotic dreams would send psychic shockwaves across space, creating safe zones where the crystalline predators could not hunt. His brain patterns are unlike anything I've ever seen, Park told Commander Hayes as they stood beside Morrison's medical bed. He's simultaneously dreaming, thinking logically, and experiencing pure emotion. It's as if his mind exists in multiple states at once. Hayes looked down at his captain and friend. That sounds about right for Jake. He never could do anything the simple way. The combined human-alien fleet had spent the time preparing for something that had never been attempted before, a direct assault on the stalker homeworld. No expedition had ever traveled beyond the galactic rim and returned. The region was twisted by dark energy and psychic distortions that drove most beings insane. Captain Chen entered the medical bay with new intelligence reports. Our long-range scouts have found it. The stalker homeworld is 3 weeks past the galactic edge, in a region where space itself seems broken. The pilots who got closest said reality stops making sense out there. How close did they get? Park asked. Close enough to see it's not really a planet. It's some kind of massive crystalline structure that exists partially outside normal space-time. The thing pulses with the absorbed consciousness of billions of victims. Hayes studied the sensor readings. If we're going to do this, we need Morrison awake. His chaotic thinking is our only defense against whatever we'll find there. As if responding to his words, Morrison's eyes suddenly opened. But instead of the familiar brown color, they now shifted between different hues, like oil on water. When he spoke, his voice carried strange harmonics. I can hear them, Morrison said quietly. All the voices of the consumed. They're trapped in the crystal network, but they're still aware, still screaming after centuries of imprisonment. Park ran medical scans while Morrison sat up slowly. Jake, how do you feel? Different. I can see the stalker network now, spread across the galaxy like a web, but I can also see the gaps where human thoughts have torn holes in their system. Morrison looked at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. They're afraid, Lisa. For the first time in millions of years, they're actually afraid. Commander Hayes helped Morrison to his feet. Afraid of what? Chaos. Creativity. The human ability to imagine things that shouldn't exist but somehow do anyway. Morrison walked to the viewport and stared out at the stars. They've been feeding on order for so long that they've forgotten how to handle randomness. We're like a computer virus in their perfect system. Over the next few days, Morrison briefed the fleet commanders on what he had learned during his mental connection with the stalkers. The creatures originated from outside the galaxy millions of years ago. They were refugees from their own dimension, fleeing something even worse than themselves. They discovered they could sustain themselves by consuming consciousness, Morrison explained to the assembled captains. At first it was just survival, but over time it became an addiction. They grew larger and more complex with each mind they absorbed, until they became the perfect predator. Elder Zor raised a question that had been troubling many of the alien species. If they are refugees, perhaps we could negotiate with them, find an alternative to their feeding. Morrison shook his head. I've seen their core consciousness. It's too late for negotiation. They've consumed so many minds that they're no longer individual beings. They've become a collective entity driven only by hunger. The only way to stop them is to destroy their central intelligence. Captain Chen was studying the tactical challenges. The homeworld is defended by millions of stalker vessels. Even with our chaos tactics, we can't fight that many ships. We don't need to, Morrison replied. The entire stalker network is controlled from the planet's core. If we can reach the central consciousness and disrupt it, every stalker in the galaxy will be affected. Colonel Williams had been planning the ground assault with his surviving Marines. My people are ready, but we need to know what we're walking into. Morrison's eyes went distant as he accessed memories from his connection to the hive. The planet's Surface is a maze of crystalline formations that amplify psychic energy. Each step you take will be monitored by the collective consciousness. The very air will try to drain your thoughts. Dr. Park had been developing countermeasures based on their battle experience. I've modified our mental defenses. Each team member will carry a device that broadcasts random human thoughts, childhood memories, silly songs, impossible scenarios. It should provide some protection. The journey to the Stalker homeworld took the fleet through regions of space where the normal rules of physics began to break down. Human crews reported seeing things that couldn't exist, ships flying backward through time, stars that sang lullabies, planets made of crystallized music. The aliens are having trouble with this, Captain Chen reported during one of their daily briefings. The Zephyrians are getting headaches from the psychic distortions. The Nixari's instruments can't make sense of the sensor readings, but the humans adapted to the impossible conditions better than anyone expected. Their chaotic minds simply accepted the contradictions and moved on. When reality stopped making sense, they just shrugged and dealt with it. It's like living in a dream, Lieutenant Stone reported from communications. Nothing follows logical rules, but somehow we keep functioning anyway. Commander Hayes laughed. After dealing with military bureaucracy for 20 years, warped space-time seems pretty normal to me. As they approached the Stalker homeworld, the fleet encountered their first major challenge. The planet existed partially outside normal space-time, making it impossible to approach using conventional navigation. Morrison had the answer. We can't think our way to it logically. We have to feel our way there. He closed his eyes and extended his enhanced consciousness toward the dark planet. Everyone focus on the most impossible thing you can imagine. Picture the planet as something it's not. The human crews began imagining the Stalker world as everything except what it actually was. They pictured it as a giant flower, a floating castle, a ball of yarn, anything but a crystalline nightmare. Somehow, this collective act of creative denial allowed their ships to slip through the dimensional barriers. The planet that appeared before them was beyond description. It was simultaneously solid and transparent, ancient and newly born, beautiful and terrifying. Crystalline spires reached up from the surface like frozen screams, while aurora-like energy danced between them. Scanning the surface, Park reported, her voice shaking. I'm reading massive psychic emanations from the planet's core. There's something down there that's been growing for millions of years. Morrison felt the pull of the central consciousness calling to him like a siren song. That's our target, the original Stalker mind that started all of this. It's become so large and complex that it can't handle chaos anymore. Any exposure to random human thoughts causes it physical pain. Colonel Williams was preparing his assault team when Morrison made an announcement that surprised everyone. I'm going down with the ground team. Commander Hayes objected immediately. Jake, you're too valuable. Your connection to their network is our biggest advantage. That's exactly why I have to go, Morrison replied. The central consciousness knows I'm coming. It's been calling to me since I woke up. This isn't just a military operation anymore. It's personal. Dr. Park equipped Morrison and the assault team with every protective device she could create. Remember, the planet itself is alive and hostile. Every crystal formation is part of the collective mind. Stay chaotic, stay creative, and whatever you do, don't let your thoughts become too organized. As the assault shuttles prepared to launch, Morrison looked back at his crew one final time. If this goes wrong, get the fleet out of here. Don't let humanity's chaos be consumed by their order. Hayes saluted his captain. Good hunting, Jake. Show them what human imagination can really do. The shuttles launched toward the crystalline planet below, carrying humanity's best hope into the heart of the galaxy's greatest nightmare. Whatever waited in the planet's core had been feeding on consciousness for millions of years, but it had never tasted human dreams before. The final assault began with every human in the fleet linking their minds through a modified Zephyrian telepathic network. Instead of creating mental unity like the alien species expected, the humans produced something the galaxy had never seen before: organized chaos. Their combined consciousness became a storm of contradictory thoughts, impossible ideas, and pure creative madness. Captain Morrison felt the mental connection establish itself as his shuttle descended toward the stalker homeworld surface. Thousands of human voices filled his mind, but instead of confusion, he found strength in their beautiful randomness. Each person was thinking about different things: childhood memories, favorite foods, silly jokes, impossible dreams. And together, they created a symphony of chaos that made him smile. Dr. Park and Commander Hayes were with him in the lead shuttle, along with Colonel Williams and 12 Marines. The craft's hull had been inscribed with human poetry, mathematical paradoxes, and the lyrics to ancient songs. Anything that might confuse the planet's attempts to understand them. "Landing in 30 seconds, announced the pilot, Lieutenant Sarah Kim. "The surface is completely covered in crystal formations. It looks like a frozen scream." As they touched down, the team immediately felt the planet's hostile attention. The crystalline ground beneath their feet pulsed with malevolent energy, trying to probe their minds for organized thoughts to consume. But the humans were ready. "Everyone start thinking about the most ridiculous things you can imagine," Morrison ordered as they stepped onto the alien surface. "Turner, you're on point. Keep that poetry going." Sergeant Turner began reciting nonsense verses while the team advanced between towering crystal spires. Each formation sang with the voices of consumed victims, creating a haunting chorus that would have driven most beings insane. But the Marines just started singing louder, drowning out the ghostly voices with old military marching songs. The path to the planet's core was clearly marked by increasing psychic pressure. As they moved deeper into the crystalline maze, the very air around them began to solidify, trying to trap their thoughts and drain their consciousness. "The entity knows we're coming," Morrison said, his enhanced senses feeling the ancient intelligence stirring in the planet's depths. "It's curious about us. It's never encountered minds it couldn't consume before." Dr. Park was monitoring her instruments while simultaneously thinking about flying purple elephants. "The psychic emanations are getting stronger. Whatever's down there has been growing for millions of years." They reached a massive opening in the crystal surface that led down into the planet's core. The hole pulsed with red light, and strange geometries twisted the space around it so that looking down made their eyes water. "This is it," Morrison announced. "Everyone remember, we're not fighting a battle here. We're conducting the universe's most chaotic symphony." Colonel Williams looked at his Marines with pride. "You heard the captain. Time to show this thing what human creativity really looks like." The team descended into the core chamber, and what they found defied description. The central consciousness was a massive crystalline entity that existed in multiple dimensions, simultaneously. It was beautiful and terrible, ancient and eternal, and completely alien to human understanding. But it was also afraid. Morrison could feel its fear as they approached. For millions of years it had consumed every form of consciousness it encountered. Each mind had followed predictable patterns that the entity could understand and digest. But humans were different. "We know you can hear us," Morrison called out to the ancient being. "We know you're afraid of what we represent." The entity's response came not as words, but as pure thought projected directly into their minds. It offered them everything: power beyond imagination, knowledge of the universe's secrets, immortality among the stars. Anything to make them stop their chaotic intrusion. But the humans had something the entity couldn't understand or counter. They began sharing their most human experiences with it. Morrison projected memories of his daughter's first steps. Dr. Park recalled the joy of solving an impossible equation through pure intuition. Commander Hayes shared the moment he fell in love while deployed on a distant world. The entity recoiled, as if in physical pain. It had been designed to consume and categorize all thought, but these illogical emotional experiences were concepts so alien to its ordered existence that contact with them began tearing apart its crystalline structure. Meanwhile, on the surface, the combined human-alien fleet faced the last of the Stalker Guardians. But something extraordinary was happening. The alien soldiers, inspired by their human comrades, began fighting with emotional intensity rather than cold logic. Captain Chen watched in amazement as the Nexari warrior Kex Thane charged into battle, screaming his daughter's name. The Zephyrian elder Eos was using telepathic curses he had learned from human marines. For the first time in their species' history, the aliens were fighting with their hearts instead of just their minds. In the Ega core chamber, Morrison made the ultimate sacrifice. He opened his consciousness completely and merged it with the ancient entity, flooding it with every chaotic human thought he could generate. But instead of dying, something miraculous occurred. The entity, overwhelmed by human chaos, began to change. The consumed minds it had held prisoner for millions of years started breaking free as Morrison's chaotic thoughts disrupted the crystalline network that had bound them. Dr. Park watched in wonder as ghostly figures began materializing around them, the spirits of beings who had been consumed eons ago, now liberated by exposure to human unpredictability. "It's working," she shouted. "The entity can't maintain control when exposed to pure chaos." The ancient consciousness screamed as its perfect order collapsed. It had spent millions of years building a network of crystalline perfection, and now that network was being torn apart by the simple human ability to think contradictory thoughts. But Morrison was paying a price. His body convulsed as his mind touched the vast alien intelligence. He was experiencing the memories of every being the entity had ever consumed, billions of lives spanning millions of years. Commander Hayes grabbed Morrison's shoulders, trying to anchor him to reality. "Jake, stay with us. Don't let it pull you in." Morrison's eyes opened, but they now held depths that hadn't been there before. "I'm not being pulled in," he said with wonder. "I'm setting them free." The crystalline chamber began to crack and crumble as the entity's control over the planet failed. But something beautiful was happening. The liberated consciousness of countless beings across the galaxy were creating a new form of order, one that embraced chaos as well as logic, emotion as well as reason. Dr. Park managed to extract Morrison's consciousness before the entity fully collapsed, but he was forever changed. He could now perceive reality from multiple contradictory viewpoints simultaneously, a very human form of enlightenment that allowed him to see truth in paradox. As they escaped the collapsing planet, the team watched the stalker homeworld tear itself apart. The crystalline spires crumbled into stardust while the liberated spirits of the consumed danced among the ruins like aurora. "Is it over?" Colonel Williams asked as their shuttle cleared the planet's atmosphere. Morrison smiled, his new multi-dimensional awareness showing him possibilities that hadn't existed before. "It's not over. It's just beginning. We've shown the galaxy that chaos and order can coexist. That diversity of thought creates strength, not weakness." 6 months later, the galaxy had been transformed. The human approach to creative chaos had spread throughout the Federation. Alien species were incorporating emotional decision-making and intuitive thinking into their cultures for the first time in their history. Admiral Morrison, his rank reflecting humanity's new status in the galactic community, stood on the observation deck of the new Federation headquarters. He watched ships from dozens of species working together in formations that blended ordered logic with creative unpredictability. The Void Stalkers were gone. Their threat ended not by superior weapons or tactics, but by humanity's gift for beautiful, chaotic, impossible thinking. The liberated consciousness from their network had become something new, a collective intelligence that maintained individuality while sharing knowledge. Dr. Park approached Morrison with news of her latest discovery. "The Institute for Chaotic. Science has just made a breakthrough. We've figured out how to power faster than light travel using pure imagination. Our first test ship will launch next week." Morrison nodded, watching a group of human and alien children playing together in the station's garden. They were creating games that followed no logical rules, but somehow made perfect sense to them. "You know what the best part is?" Morrison said to his old friend. "We didn't save the galaxy by becoming more like the other species. We saved it by showing them how to be more like us." Commander Hayes, now Captain Hayes, joined them at the viewport. "The first expedition beyond the Galactic Rim launches tomorrow. Mixed crews, half human and half alien. Their mission is to explore regions that require both logical thinking and creative chaos to navigate." Morrison smiled as he watched the stars. For the first time in galactic history, diversity was seen not as a weakness to be eliminated, but as a strength to be celebrated. Order and chaos, logic and emotion, alien and human, all partners in the